I don't have this picture, but they found the place where the Essenes say that they hid the ark, because they had it for a fairly long time. The place where they hid the ark was a cavern across from where they lived, across from the temple. When they opened that cavern, and this is research you can find on the net, when they opened that cavern, there was a there was a blue iridescent spot in the middle of it. There was NASA engineers, actually NASA physicists that were there at the opening of that cavern. They reported that blue spot being there, and they said something really interesting. They said, this is similar to the blue spot we found inside the Mayan pyramids when we first opened them. So they were making a direct relationship between the Ark of the Covenant, the effect of the Ark of the Covenant on the space-time manifold that left some trace, and the Mayan pyramids. And so, interestingly, when the ark disappears from the temples of the Temple of Solomon and goes to the Essene, at the same period, very shortly after, the living ark, Emmanuel, appears onto the scene. Emmanuel might have been able to walk on water because he had some anti-gravitational capability in his back pocket. Go ahead.
Well, in the Book of Mormon, why Emmanuel or Jesus visits the American continent after he left Israel.
Well, then he would have had to be able to do some pretty good flying too. And so, interestingly, Emmanuel is the living ark. Well, these things are related. Why? Because when we built the external Merkabah, the external ark, all we're building is a reproduction of our internal functioning. The inside singularity, the inside ark that keeps us alive. And so we're creating a very short feedback. That's why you had to be initiated very carefully before you could approach the ark. You had to be pure of heart. Because the feedback is so short that if you have destructive intent, you'll just die right on the spot. It'll bite you right back.
Aaron's sons.
So Aaron's sons died that way. It's a very fail-safe system. You can't use it for destruction very much. Because by the time you try to use it for destruction, you're already dead. See, it's nothing new. The universe is a feedback. We are very destructive in nature. And we're just about to destroy ourselves. But meanwhile, it took a long time, and we had time to destroy a lot of things around us. With this, no waiting necessary. You just don't survive the experience. There is people that did try to use the ark for destruction in the pharaonic traditions. These were very, very warlike pharaohs. They were found mummified with what they thought at first was smallpox all over their body. They found out later that it wasn't smallpox at all, that it was tumors all over their skin, like they had been irradiated by radioactivity. At one point, the ark is stolen by, the ark is attempted to be used for war and is taken by the Philistine before it's moved to the Essene, long before. And the same thing happens. They bring it to their temple and they try to use it and all this, and they all get tumors. It's in the Bible. And so they send it back to the Temple of Solomon. They're like, get that thing out of here. So Emmanuel was most likely born in the field of the Ark of the Covenant. And as a result, he had very advanced DNA structure. In fact, Emmanuel might have got revived by using the Ark of the Covenant and resuscitating him, generating the whole, return of Emmanuel, return of Jesus 3 days later. Well, when I was asked to talk about the Knights Templar, so you guys are seeing this view a little bit more. I'm going to tell you now how it reaches you, how far this goes, and how much the power at B is actually trying to get this power back. First of all, the key to the Bible is to understand that the Old Testament is talking about advanced technology, very, very advanced technology. The crystal, the power of the sun gods, the power of Atlantis, which was brought out of Atlantis, brought to Egypt, and eventually brought to the Temple of Solomon by Moses. And the other side of the Bible, the New Testament, is talking about the living ark, the purity of heart, the purity of intent you have to be with the ark. And it's actually when the two are put together that we have the new level of civilization. When the technology, the external technology matches our internal knowledge, and the internal knowledge match the external technology. It is not all internal, like spiritual, commonly think of, and it is not completely external like most physicists think of, but it is both internal and external. That's the feedback. So when much later, it seems like there was a Jewish contingency in France that believed that they were the direct descendant of Emmanuel, the Cathars. And the Cathars, I think, was it the Cathars? Yeah, I believe so. They were looking for the Ark of the Covenant. This is a large Jewish community in the middle of France that nobody knows how they got there. There's a lot of books now being published saying that actually Emmanuel, after his crucifixion and its revival, went through India and into Europe and resettled in France. And the Cathars were truly the bloodline of Emmanuel. In any case, true or false, they believed they were. And they were looking for the ark. They might have had very ancient documents that were brought there by the groups that settled the Jewish community there. They started an order of knights to look for the ark. That order was called the Knights Templar. The first name they were given was the Knights of the Poor, because they were very poor, and their insignia was 2 knights on 1 horse, because they couldn't afford a horse for every knight. They were commissioned by a priest, a Cathar priest, to look for the ark. Well, after years of research and so on, they came to conclude that the ark had to be in Jerusalem somewhere, under the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. They conjured the armies of France. Okay? They convinced them to go and take Jerusalem. And as a result, started the Crusades. This is history. The Crusades were described in the tales of the search for the Holy Grail. They couldn't talk about the ark directly because of Inquisition. So they called it the Holy Grail. And in the first edition of that story, they call it a crystal stone. Later on, describing it as a cup which had 2 vortices on each side. And so they went across all the countries they needed to go across to go to Jerusalem. They fought their way through all the way, generating huge amount of difficulties, and eventually got to Jerusalem and took over the ancient city of Jerusalem. This is historic. They were there and they occupied Jerusalem for many years. For 7 of those years, the Knights Templar themselves settled right beside the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and dug and dug and dug tunnels that are still there today. But because this is Islamic ground today, the temple, the mount, it's the rock of foundation is right under the dome of the rock in Jerusalem, which is Islamic, is under Islamic control. The Islamic population goes there on pilgrimage, turn around the rock where the ark used to be placed inside the Temple of Solomon. They're venerating the exact same thing as the Jewish tradition. And they're all fighting. Amazing. In any case, those tunnels are still there under the ark, under the Temple Mount. They're not accessible. You can't go there. They are blocked and they're heavily guarded. In any case, the Knights Templar dug for 7 years and found zilch. Well, they found a lot of documents, and that's in history books, but they didn't find the ark. It just happens that while they were there digging, the king of Ethiopia was in exile. There was a revolution in Ethiopia and was brought in exile to Jerusalem. And when he heard the Knights Templars were looking for the ark, he went to them and said,